Welcome to Spectral Shadows, where the darkness whispers and the unseen lurks. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it? Because horror feels different at night, especially when you're alone. Those who love their mother, like, share, and comment. Subscribe, if you dare. Now turn off the lights, and let's begin. Story number 1. I was really anxious for Alan to meet my parents. He was my first boyfriend after a long time. We met at the store where I worked, where he came in looking for running shoes and left with my number. We had been together for just over 2 months, and he was already insisting on meeting my parents. When he finally arrived at our house, my mom greeted him at the door with her usual warmth and gave him a big hug. He thanked her and came in shyly. He was tall, a few years older than me, and had a lot of tattoos. I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek and led him to the dining room, where my dad was already sitting, drinking a beer and messing with something on his phone. But when he looked up and saw Alan, his eyes widened and his mouth dropped slightly. Alan stepped forward and raised his hand to greet him, and my dad just stared at it for a few seconds before slowly lifting his own, like he wasn't sure. I was pretty upset by that reaction. I expected some resistance. He was a protective dad and a retired police officer. But Alan's look clearly made him uncomfortable, and he didn't hide it. I thought that was rude. My mom noticed the awkward silence and quickly stepped in. She told Alan to sit across from my dad at our small 4-person table and told us to go ahead and serve ourselves. During dinner, my mom asked Alan about his family. He said they were immigrants and that he grew up in San Antonio before moving here. My mom let out a surprised sigh and said she loved San Antonio. We had lived there before my father got transferred. From that point on, the conversation got livelier. Between compliments about the food, Alan started to relax and talked with my mom about his life in San Antonio and his job at a car dealership. But while the three of us kept chatting, my dad stayed quiet, poking at his food like he had no appetite. He didn't say a word. Every time my mom nudged him to join in, he'd turn to her looking pale, like he'd seen a ghost, then go back to staring at his plate. When we finished eating, my mom mentioned she had made a special dessert to welcome Alan. Her famous cheesecake, the one I'd spent the whole afternoon running around town to get the exact ingredients for. She excused herself and headed to the kitchen, and I told Alan I'd go help her. I figured leaving the two of them alone might help. Someone had to break the ice. When I got to the kitchen, my mom went straight to check the fridge, and I took the chance to ask her why my dad was acting so weird that day. She said she wasn't sure either, but it might have something to do with some bad news he got that morning. Something about 2 former co-workers from the PD I vaguely remembered. What happened? I asked. 2 of them died last month. Tragic stuff, she said, dividing her focus between explaining and testing the texture of the cheesecake. One died in a car crash on the highway with his whole family. The other died in a house fire. I felt bad for them, and I wondered if his behavior was just him grieving old buddies. Still, that didn't explain taking it out on Alan. My mom said the dessert was almost ready. She just needed to finish the topping, and asked me to check with my dad where he'd put the offset spatula. I grabbed the dessert plates and forks on the way and walked back to the living room, hoping they'd maybe broken the ice with some football talk or whatever. But as soon as I stepped in, I froze. My dad was crying, not just tearing up, crying hard, like I'd never seen before. Alan was still in the same seat, staring at him with a cold, piercing look. I walked over confused, set the plates down, and asked what was going on. Neither of them looked at me. My dad paused his crying for a second and spoke to Alan. "This is not fair. "I was only doing my job," he said, his voice shaking. "I didn't know anything when I arrested you." "When you framed me," Alan cut in, his voice sharp and unfamiliar to me, "and I got 15 years for it." "I was just following orders," my dad replied, almost begging. Alan grinned like he'd been waiting for that line. "Every one of them," he said. "Every single one told me you gave the orders. It didn't take long after I played with them." Before Alan could finish, my dad leaned forward, shot me a side glance, and spoke with panic in his eyes. "At least leave my family out of this. They didn't do anything. Did you know my mother killed herself?" Alan said, his voice low and deadly calm. "She couldn't bear to think I'd done the things you accused me of. So I'll have to think about it," he continued, flashing a disturbing smile. Then, for the first time since I'd walked in, he looked straight at me. His eyes were wild, like a beast caged and about to break loose. I was ready to scream or run or anything, but my dad suddenly grabbed my arm hard. "The spatula is in the second drawer of the pantry." "Dad, this isn't the second drawer," he said again, low and firm. "Go get it for your mother. Now." My heart was pounding. Why was he saying that now? But then, like a lightning strike, I remembered. That was where he kept his extra Glock, like the paranoid retired cop he was. I didn't say anything. I turned and walked slowly down the hallway, under Alan's terrifying gaze. As soon as I was out of his sight, I ran to the pantry, past my mom's confused face. The Glock was exactly where I remembered. I loaded it, turned around, and sprinted back to the dining room, ready to aim and shoot if I had to. But when I got there, only one person was still at the table. Alan was gone. No sign of him. My dad sat still, head hanging low like he'd fallen asleep. But as I stepped closer, I saw he wasn't breathing. Buried deep into his neck was a dessert fork, almost halfway in. Story number 2. I don't remember who gave my daughter the phone. Perhaps Mia found it abandoned after the school fete, a grubby plastic prize forgotten on a trestle table. Or maybe she simply took it, small fingers closing around its cheap pink body when no one was looking. It appeared one afternoon, clutched in her hand. It looked harmless enough. Garish pink plastic, oversized buttons, a receiver attached by a tight coil of wire. Harmless until the dial tone started. A thin, persistent electronic buzz emanated from its hollow core, a sound that had no right to exist in a toy lacking any battery compartment, any mechanism at all beyond molded plastic. Mia pressed the buttons with solemn concentration. Beep, beep, beep. The dial tone hummed again. "See, Mama?" she announced. "It works." I forced a smile, watching dishwater drip from my fingers onto the worn linoleum. It probably has a tiny battery compartment I missed, I reasoned, already mentally turning the toy over, searching for seams. Kids' toys were sneaky like that. "That's lovely, Bug," I said, aiming for lightness. "Who are you calling?" But Mia wasn't pretending to have a conversation. She lifted the receiver to her ear, her small face shifting into an expression of intense, unnerving focus. Her eyes widened slightly, pupils dilating in the dim kitchen light. Then she lowered the phone. "Mama?" she asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "The phone man says he's downstairs." Downstairs. Boxgrove Cottage, our weathered sanctuary, the place David built stone by stone with his own hands before the cancer took him, stood defiantly on the ancient flint foundations he'd chosen. A single story. I knew its bones like I knew my own. David had shown me every joist, every beam, every compacted inch of earth. before the floorboards went down. No cellar, no basement, not even a crawl space. That's just pretend, sweetheart. I managed, my throat constricting. You know there is no downstairs here, silly phone man. The ritual became dreadful. Mia would lift the receiver, press any button. The impossible dial tone would buzz, a hungry metallic drone. Then a silence would fall. Mia's face would go still, her child's features absorbing words I strained to hear but couldn't. He's downstairs, she'd state flatly, returning the receiver to its cradle, her small brow furrowed with an uncertainty that felt strange on her face. One gray afternoon, as rain lashed the small windows, she shivered violently after listening. He says it's cold down there, Mama. Really cold. A shiver traced its way down my own spine. One afternoon I had enough and snatched the phone from her hands. The plastic felt unnaturally frigid, as if it had lain in snow, sucking the warmth from my fingers, its hollowness mocking me. I hurled it into the kitchen bin, the cheap plastic clattering against the metal sides. Mia's reaction was immediate. She screamed a wail, small fists pounding my legs with surprising force, tears streaming down her face. My phone, she screamed, the sound raw and desperate. The fight left her trembling and hiccuping on the kitchen floor, her eyes huge and swimming with betrayal. Defeated, trembling myself, I retrieved the hateful thing from the bin, wiping greasy coffee grounds off the plastic. Fine. That night, I hid it. Properly hid it. Wrapped in an old tea towel, shoved deep into the cold, dark recesses at the back of the rarely used linen closet, behind stacks of yellowed towels. I locked the closet door. I checked on Mia twice, her breathing soft and even in sleep, her hands empty. The next morning, Mia padded in, her hair sleep-tousled, pajamas rumpled, and clutched tightly in her small hand. Its pink plastic garish against the soft flannel was the toy phone. My blood turned to ice. I whirled, stumbling towards the linen closet. The door was still locked. I fumbled with the key, my hands shaking violently. Inside, everything was undisturbed. The stacks of towels sat exactly as I'd left them. I shoved my hand deep into the dark space at the back, fingers scrabbling against the cold wall. Nothing, just dust, and the smell of forgotten fabric. The tea towel bundle was gone. He missed us, she said. That day, I called Tom, my brother. Kids, Tsar. He boomed down the line. Remember Brutus, my invisible wolf who supposedly ate my geometry homework? His chuckle died when I didn't join in. This isn't Brutus, Tom, I whispered. She knows there's no downstairs. She asked me yesterday why the phone man lies to her. Silence crackled down the phone line, heavy and sudden. Right, he said finally, his voice losing its easy confidence. Bring the bloody thing over. Let's have a look at this demon phone. Tom's apartment smelled of stale pizza and damp laundry. Mia proudly held out the phone for her uncle. She pressed a button. Beep, 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 dial tone. Silence. She pressed another. Beep, 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 dial tone. Longer silence. Relief washed over me. Thank God. I sagged against his cluttered countertop. Tom, however, frowned, turning the inert plastic over in his large hands. He shook it near his ear. Nothing? Or, he said slowly, his gaze meeting mine, serious now. Maybe it only works. There, at the cottage. The drive home was filled with a thick, unspeakable dread. As I turned the key in the heavy oak door of the cottage, a sound shattered the suffocating quiet. A shrill, mechanical ring ripped from the toy in Mia's arms. Impossible. Mia answered before I could move, before I could scream. "Uh-huh," she murmured, listening intently. Her small face showed no fear, only a strange concentration. "Okay." She held the receiver out towards me. Her voice was flat, devoid of its usual childish lilt. "He says you have to talk now, Mama." My lungs seized. I took the plastic receiver. My hand shook violently as I slowly, dreadfully raised it to my ear. Static roared, not the white noise of a dead channel, but the rasp of countless dry leaves scouring ancient stone. Then beneath it, cutting through the chaos, came the voice. Resonating within the cheap plastic shell, yet feeling impossibly vast, cavernous, like stone grinding against stone deep within the earth. "Sarah." It knew my name. "Can you feel the cold seep up? Let me in. I am downstairs." The phone clattered from my nerveless fingers, striking the flagstone floor with a sharp crack. Mia jumped, her eyes wide. "Mama, you're all white." She sounded scared now, finally sensing the terror radiating from me. We had to get out. The thoughts screamed in my head. Now, I swept Mia up, ignoring her startled cry, and ran for the front door, fumbling with the deadbolt I'd just thrown. Cold air hit us as I burst outside, stumbling down the path towards our old Volvo parked beside the cottage. I yanked the passenger door open, practically shoving Mia inside onto the seat. "Stay there," I gasped, slamming her door and lunging for the driver's side. My hands shook so badly, the key scraped metal before finding the ignition. Turn, please." I twisted it. Nothing. No. I twisted again, frantic, dead. The engine was lifeless. A wave of cold washed over me then. It felt like icy fingers brushing the nape of my neck. A silent, palpable presence, watching from the doorway I'd left gaping open. The flint walls seemed to loom darker, the empty windows like watching eyes. We couldn't stay exposed out here. With a choked sob, I ripped Mia back out of the car, her small body limp with confusion. I sprinted back towards the cottage, the sense of something pursuing, something reaching, propelling me forward. I slammed the heavy oak door shut behind us with all my strength. Only then, gasping for breath, did I bolt it with trembling hands, then raced to the back door, throwing that lock too. Finally, I yanked curtains closed across every small window, plunging the cottage into premature twilight, shutting out the world and the impossible cold that had followed us back inside. Night crawled in. I huddled on the worn sofa, Mia curled tight against me, her breathing eventually slowing into sleep, lulled by the frantic hammering rhythm of my own heart against her small back. Exhaustion dragged me under into a fitful, nightmare-haunted sleep. I dreamed of roots, thick as my wrist and glistening with dark moisture, forcing hairline cracks in the cottage's foundation stones. I dreamed of something patient, something older than the flint itself, uncurling in the absolute, suffocating dark far below, shifting with the slow deliberation of continents. I snapped awake. Not from the dream, from the sound. Scritch-scratch, scritch-scratch. I take a few minutes to try and locate it. Not at the door, not at the window, under the floor, directly beneath the threadbare rug in front of the cold hearth. The sound of something hard and sharp. Claws, stones, dragging across solid rock. Scritch-scratch, scritch-scratch. Mia slept on, her face peaceful in the gloom. I lay paralyzed, every muscle locked, breath trapped in my frozen chest. I stared fixedly at the worn rug, the floorboards beneath it, willing the sound to be a dream, a trick of the wind, anything but what I knew it was. It stopped, then it rose. What I could describe as a low-frequency vibration that hummed in the marrow of my bones, a pressure building inside my skull, pressing against my eardrums. The voice, stripped now of any echo of humanity, resonated with the crushing weight of strata, the groan of tectonic plates, the absolute void of deep places. Sarah, my breath, stopped. The cottage itself seemed to hold its breath. The scratching did not resume. There was only the heavy waiting silence and the terrible, unspoken knowledge of what lay beneath. Story number 3. Every mile I found myself regretting the recruiter's offer a little more. The pay was good. Too good. As I eyed the dilapidated houses with blankets over the windows and abandoned gas stations, it became clear why. Relics of a long-past oil boom dotted the landscape in the form of crumbling manors. The main strip reveled in apparent attempts to preserve some of the town's dignity. It was a shame fresh paint and flowers could only offer so much charm. The hospital came out of nowhere as I took the last bend. It was tucked inside the heart of the county with woods flanking on either side. I couldn't remember the last time I had seen so many trees. My assignments were typically in hospitals precariously set in the middle of busy cities where the sirens never stopped, and parking spots were a hot commodity. The building was squat, and only half the letters on the sign lit up, but smiling people chatted with each other on the sidewalk, and staff in brightly colored scrubs greeted patients like old friends. I threw my backpack over my shoulders and headed in. The sliding door squeaked, and I braced myself for the scrutiny of a security guard. Instead, I was met with a cheerful hello from the associate behind the front desk. I looked around the cozy lobby and felt myself relax. The lobby was bathed in warm, muted colors, and well-loved houseplants lined the windows. The murmur of daytime television gave the air a sense of lulling. "Hi." My voice betrayed my nerves. "I'm the new traveler." "Oh, you must be Talia," she gushed. "We've been so excited to meet you. It's always a treat to have a new face around here. I'm Crystal, by the way. Make yourself at home. I'll call Kim. She's the nursing director. You'll love her." I smiled and sat in one of the patterned chairs, idly rubbing the worn grain of the armrests. Kim wasted no time busting in through the door, a smile plastered on her face, almost as bright her hot pink scrubs. She was a far cry from the pantsuits and scowls I was accustomed to management sporting. "Talia, is it? We are just thrilled to have an extra set of hands. Come on, honey, let's get you settled." She rattled off facts as she walked me down the hall. It was a 13-bed critical access hospital with a surprisingly busy emergency room that served surrounding rural community. A central nurses' station looked down 2 short halls and a meager trauma bay. Most of the equipment seemed familiar, just on a much smaller scale than I was used to. The paint was chipped and the furniture outdated, but the space was clearly well-loved. It was more than I could say for many of my previous assignments. Kim took me to HR to get my paperwork started after her tour and explained my schedule. She would have me go through an expedited orientation for a day and then 2 weeks on day shift before I was sent to nights for the remainder of my assignment. I shuddered at the thought. Truth be told, I was sick of the night shift. Every hospital I had been to seemed a little more intimidating at night, and the longer I worked the shifts, the further shadows seemed to stretch in the corners. I could feel the breath stealing from my lungs and my vision blacking out at the thought of those dark fingers stretching closer, ever closer, strangling me in the broad daylight. "Talia, are you okay?" Kim frowned, genuine concern lining her face. I forced out a shuddered breath. "Of course. I'm just tired from traveling." "Well, dear, we really are glad to have you. Your family while you're here." I faked a smile and nodded along. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur as I finished up the last of my training. "It's too bad you're on nights. "We'll miss you," one of the day nurses told me. Instinctively, I searched for the lie in the words, almost annoyed when I found only authenticity. "I couldn't do it," another chimed in. "The ghost stories freak me out too much. Don't scare her." She rested a hand on my forearm, and I bit back my aversion to the touch. "They are kind spirits." The other nurse snorted. "Tell that to the last traveler." Hair raised on the back of my neck. "What happened to them?" She waved her hand in dismissal. "Don't worry about it. You belong here." I rolled her words about belonging, the lie leaving a bitter ash on my tongue as I drove to my first night shift. The lights of the hospital did little to banish the shadows. Instead, they seemed to suck in the softness of the building to leave nothing but sharp edges. Inside, the fluorescence seemed dim without sunlight. The ceilings were too low, and the halls too narrow. Reflections warped off linoleum floor that had been waxed too many times. I swallowed hard. It was all in my mind. It always was. I was joining 3 nurses on this shift who greeted me with the same enthusiasm everyone else had. 3 things you gotta do on our shift. 1, leave the supply closet cracked. 2, the lights stay off in the therapy room. Nobody uses it at night anyway. 3, don't bother the night janitor. He's real grumpy, but he can get a bloodstain out of anything. You can talk to Rosa, the other night janitor, but she doesn't speak English. Cassie rattled the list off without so much as pausing for a breath of air. Taylor must have seen the questions in my eyes. When the air turns on at night, it makes a knocking sound on the door, and the wiring is bad in the therapy room. It flickers a lot. I didn't notice on days. Kate laughed. Day shifters don't notice anything. I'll show you the extra stuff we do at night. If we get done fast enough and the ER is slow, we have a lot of fun around here. My initial unease faded fast. The ER kept us so busy those first couple of weeks that I didn't have time to think about it. We made for a great team, and I found myself relaxing on shift for the first time in years. Fall painted the landscape anew, and I found myself seeing the beauty in this little town more with each passing day. Perhaps I had been too quick to latch on to the flaws. The community did have a certain charm about it. I sat at the nurse's desk alone, scrolling through my phone long enough that when I looked up, the dim light seemed jarring. The busy summer spell was coming to an end, and I was soaking in the opportunity to sit back for once. A sharp 3 knocks straightened my back. My head swung around as I searched for the source. I was about to walk down the hall and check on the patients when the rapping sounded again from the supply closet. "Cassie, did you lock yourself in there?" I laughed as I swung open the door. It was empty. "I told you to keep the door open." I whipped around to see Cassie behind me. "But it's just the AC kicking on." That was not the AC. She walked around me and pushed the door to where it was cracked. "This building is over 60 years old. It makes weird sounds." She walked away, and I stared after her as she made rounds, my heart pounding in my chest. "The truth is what you make it." Taylor's voice held a tinge of sadness to it as she joined me. The next night I was on inpatient duty in the 200 hall. I brought the patients their dinner, fresh blankets, and nightly medications. It was easy to form idle chat with them as I took their vitals and settled them in for the night. Even those in pain were happy just to have some company as the lonely fall of night swept over the facility. Once everyone was good, I kicked back at the nurse's station. I eyed the cracked supply closet and tried to keep my heart rate from skyrocketing like it did every time I saw that slit of darkness. My skin crawled at the thought of something lurking in the void. The call light for room 213 came on and pulled me out of my own head. I frowned. Nobody was in that room tonight. "Hey, Cass. I thought room 213 was empty." "It is," she shrugged. "Probably a glitch." It happens sometimes. Just turn it off. I rubbed the goosebumps on my arms, but I wasn't about to admit I was afraid of a faulty call light. The hall seemed to close in on me with each step, and suddenly, the void of the supply closet didn't seem so intimidating. Hello? My voice quivered as I peered around the door into the dark room. A figure loomed in the corner. It reached for me, warping the darkness around in it, a murky swirl of shadows. My mouth opened, and a scream caught in my throat as I slammed the light switch and pedaled backwards, falling over my own feet. I hit the ground and scrambled until my back hit the wall, with the image of the figure stalking towards me burned into my retinas. Talia! Taylor crouched down with me, while Cassie and Kate ran into the room. Just breathe, you're okay, Taylor murmured. We both looked up as Cassie came out of the room pushing an EKG cart. It's just the broken cart, Tal. Sure gave you a spook. Cassie wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. Kate frowned. I thought they shipped this thing off to get the screen fixed. What's it doing here? I don't know. A day shift can take it to the loading dock in the morning, Taylor said. You could take it, Cassie muttered. We don't go to the loading dock at night, Taylor snapped. Come on, Talia. I think you could use a break. It took me a long time to stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, the dark blotches behind my eyelids twisted into that cloaked figure. It hadn't been the EKG card, but what else could it have been? I was making my own ghosts. If there was anything being a traveler had taught me, it was that there wasn't a soul around better at ruining their own fortune than myself. Nobody said much for the next few shifts, until the weird tension finally broke. I stuck to the ER cases for a while until I felt up to inpatients again. It was all in my head, I told myself. We had a new admit who was Native American. She had a beautiful handmade blanket that she laid across her lap in her room. She was a lovely patient, and I found myself lingering in her room as she told me stories from her childhood on the reservation. She was desperate to return home. Her eyes held a faraway light, and I wondered what it was like to feel that connected to place, to feel like there was somewhere you inexplicably belonged. She grew colder over her stay and stopped telling stories. It dampened my mood, but I brushed it off. Hospital stays were draining, and I couldn't fault her for that. I didn't think much more of it until Kim pulled me into her office one morning as I was leaving. Look, Talia, I know you aren't from around here, so you may not be aware of some parts of cultural care for our Native American population, but you need to be more respectful. What did I do? I'm sorry. I swear it wasn't on purpose. Her mouth formed a tight line. I'm sure you didn't know, but you can't whistle at night. It's believed that it invites negative energy. Oh, okay. I can't whistle, though. I'm reminding all the girls, but I did pull the security footage to see who was doing it. She tapped at her computer, muttering in annoyance at the device as she went along. Ah, here. She turned the screen towards me with a squeak and clicked play on the clip. It was a fuzzy rendering of the 200 hall, so washed out that it almost seemed in grayscale. Sure enough, I was walking along with a handful of blankets in my arms. The camera was at my back, so you couldn't see my face, but the unmistakable sound of whistling sounded from my figure. We all have our little fidgets. Please just be more aware, and do not whistle at work. I hastily agreed, and rushed out of the office, tears burning behind my eyes. Never had I whistled, but it was right there, on the camera, as clear as day. What was wrong with me? The girls must have sensed I was off the next shift. They kept trying to cheer me up, but I found myself drifting further into my own listlessness. Kate snapped me out of it when she hopped up on a rolling chair to pop the clock off the wall, like she did every night. I instinctively reached out and steadied the chair. Is this OSHA approved? I joked. She laughed. Don't report me. Why are you always messing with that thing, anyway? Cassie leaned over the counter. She's OCD, gotta have the timeline up exactly. Kate rolled her eyes. Shut up. This stupid thing gets stuck every night, and I'm tired of the day shifters whining about it. I wish they would just replace it, but this place is so cheap. Have you tried new batteries? Girl, I've gone through a whole box. It's just a cheap clock. I eyed it with suspicion. It was about as basic as a clock could be. White background, blocky black letters, and a cracked faux wood border that almost seemed to warp the plastic cover. The hands quivered as she rotated it, stuck on 333. Everything around here is crappy, Cassie moaned as she tapped the security monitor screen. Floating orbs drifted across the CCTV feed overlooking the loading dock. Freaking cameras pick up every dust mote in the county. A chill snaked up my spine as the orbs faded away, only to reappear on another feed across the hospital. My mouth went dry, and I found myself transfixed as I watched them drift in a hypnotic dance across the screens. Bet Rosa could clean off the dust. Taylor mused. No, don't make Rosa climb up there. That other janitor dude could do it if he wasn't such a douche. I'll tell Jason in the morning, Kate retorted. Oh, first name basis with the maintenance guy now? Scandalous, Cassie chirped. Shut up, everyone is on a first name basis here. Sure, that sounds like an excuse to me. Their light-hearted bickering couldn't pull me away as my eyes stayed trained on the screens. It was as though I were underwater, their voices distorted and far away as my heartbeat pounded in my ears. One by one, the orbs died away. None of them seemed to care as they drifted off to check on the patients. I stood up, fast, balling my fists so tight that I felt the bite of my fingernails in my palms. The janitor kept sweeping on the back hall monitor. He never faltered away from his hyper-focus on whatever task he was working on, but as though he could feel the rake of my gaze. He looked up as though staring back at me. The grain of the feed made his eyes look like a pair of dark vacuums. The arrival of an ambulance pulled me away. I pushed myself further into my work, rather than dwell on those camera feeds, vowing that one of the others could glance at them from now on. My imagination was too prone to running wild. My next shifts were uneventful, to the point that I was ready to full-heartedly accept that I was crazy. After all, the others made it all seem so trivial. I wished I could relax like them and stop feeling like a guest in my own skin. An inpatient in room 103 took a liking to me. She was a kind lady, always showing me pictures of her grandkids. It was nice to have the time to connect with a patient like that. She stopped me one night as I was saying my goodbyes. Could you please have them do something about the scratching on the window? It wakes me up at night. I walked over to the pane. Light reflected back from the hallway, obscuring the outside world. The corners were stained with mildew, but sure enough, long-fingered branches scraped at the edge. It grated at my ears and set my teeth on edge. I'll put in a maintenance ticket, I assured her. Thanks, love. You're an angel. I smiled and made my way back to the nurse's station. Hey, Kate, can you hit up Jason to trim the branches outside 103's room? Sure thing. She spun around in her chair. Oh, can you take some water to 208, please? Of course. I made my way down the hallway that seemed darker than usual. One of the light bulbs was out, so I went to the end and turned on the lights in the therapy room before doubling back to 208. I was about to ask Kate to add the light bulb to the maintenance request when a flicker at the corner of my eye had spinning back around. The therapy room flashed in a series of short flickers, followed by long flares and another set of short flickers. It stabilized for so long that I thought my eyes must have been playing tricks on me before it happened again. Who turned on the therapy room lights? Taylor snapped. I The light bulb was out, and it was dark. Turn. Them. Off. Her voice was a snarl. Geez, Taylor, give her a break. It's not her fault the wiring sucks. Cassie came around the corner. Look, I'll get it. What? Afraid you're going to be the next one to have a seizure? Kate barked. It could happen to anyone with those lights flashing in the dark like that. That's happened, I managed to squeak out. They spoke at the same time. Don't worry about it. I am sorry. I tried again. She sighed. It's fine. I shouldn't have snapped. I'm a little sensitive to it is all. Taylor admitted. I was good friends with the last traveler. Morning couldn't come fast enough. Each passing shift had me craving the light of day more than the last. I found it more and more difficult to sleep, and fell into an old pattern of sleeping pills that I had sworn I wouldn't resort to again. I was caught up in my own tangled thoughts when Kate called out to me during my next shift. Hey, you gave me the wrong room number. What? I asked, confused. The branches. They were outside room 205, not 203. Kate raised her eyebrows. No, I distinctly remember seeing them in room 203 with Mrs. Cooper. Kate shrugged. You were probably just tired. Have you tried blackout curtains? Cassie butted in. Yes. My voice came out sharper than I intended, and she raised up her palms in defense. Whoa, don't shoot the messenger. Just trying to help a girl out. Yeah, sorry. Skay, hey, you want to help me roll this EKG card to the loading dock? Is that the one with the broken screen? Yay. People keep leaving it in random rooms, and I'm tired of it. Didn't Taylor say we aren't supposed to go back there at night? She rolled her eyes. Don't be superstitious, it's fine. I chewed on my lip, but followed her anyway. She chatted about the prank she had pulled on Jason and Catel while she was watching him clean mold out of the ceiling. Nothing seemed to bother her. Each step set my nerves on fire, and I felt like I was walking the gallows while she was throwing back her head with laughter. I swallowed repeatedly, my ears popping and the hair rising on the back of my neck as the temperature dipped low enough to pepper my skin with goosebumps. Man, it's cold back here. These old buildings are the worst. Here, let's just stick it by the maintenance door and maybe they'll actually box it up this time. A wave of thick cologne sent me coughing. Cassie wrinkled her nose. Ugh, gross. We both looked down the hall where the janitor was sweeping down the hall. Hey, buddy, cool it with the perfume, will ya? Cassie, I hissed. She snorted. What? Someone's got to tell him. Let's just get out of here. Tension wrought my shoulders as I felt eyes watching us leave. They left lingering swathes down my back and followed me long after we left the loading dock. I became jumpier than ever and found myself misplacing everything I touched. It was to the point that the others wouldn't even wait for me to ask anymore. They would just hand me a pen when I went to write something, knowing mine was gone. This assignment was dragging out too long. The money wasn't enough to justify it anymore. I was snapped out of my funk one morning by Kim calling us all into her office. Girls, I know you know the rules, and I know that in reality you are going to be on your phones sometimes, but you need to be discreet about it. If you keep blatantly disregarding the rules like this, I'm going to have to enforce the ban. What are you even talking about? We've been swamped. Nobody has been on their phones in weeks. Cassie bristled. I've gotten multiple complaints from patients about kids laughing outside their rooms. I know it's those little videos you all watch on your phones. And where exactly is your proof? I don't need proof when I have 7 patient complaints in 2 weeks. How do you know it's not just one of their TVs? It's spread across both halls and multiple patients. So, you think, Cassie? Kate stopped her. Look, we are sorry. It won't happen again. We left the hospital and Cassie whirled Kate around as soon as we were out of sight of the lobby. What did you do that for? You know it wasn't us. Because it isn't worth it, Cass. Just let it go. She huffed and stomped off. You think it was a TV? Taylor pursed her lips. I don't know, or care. Patients will complain about everything, but we do play on our phones when it's slow, and I don't want to risk Kim taking them away by arguing. At least this time, I didn't have to fight back tears. I was too drained to find the energy. Cut my contract. I dared them with my thoughts. What I wouldn't give to be out of that town as it cracked around me. Bringing into hyper-focus every pothole and broken streetlight, every boarded-up building and abandoned piece of furniture. Sometimes I drove into the city and stared at the glittering glass windows and neon signs just to purge this place from my mind, if only for a moment. And yet, another night came. I stared at my pen on the floor when I swore it had just been on the desk, and sighed. If I left it, it would probably disappear just like all the others. A call light flashed for room 103, and I slid my chair back slowly. My hatred for that room was only beat out by 213. What can I help you with? I asked the lady, who had bundled herself under a pile of blankets so thick that only a pair of watery eyes peered out. Make him stop touching my face. I just want to go to sleep. Who is touching your face? The man in the hat. He keeps coming in here and touching my face. I'm tired of it. Okay, I'll see what I can do. She harumphed and buried herself deeper into her blanket nest. Hey, Taylor, has 103 had any visitors? No, the doctor hasn't even made rounds for a while. She said a man in a hat keeps touching her face. Taylor paled but recovered quickly. She's in early-stage dementia. I'll mention it to the doc in morning rounds. You know what they say about Hat Man? Cassie sang. Not this again. Kate groaned, sliding down into the chair at the station. She's gonna croak. 72 hours, bet. Cass, don't talk like that about patients. She rolled her eyes. Literally everyone does. Yay, well, Kim is already on our asses, so at least do it when we aren't sitting under cameras. Fine, but y'all should make your bets. I looked up at the camera and wondered if orbs floated around us like they did on the feeds. An involuntary shiver crawled up my spine at the thought, and I dared to peek at the screens. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the janitor sweeping away. It was a wonder there was any dust to mote with him around. The very next night, a bang sent me rocking to my feet when the grief room door swung open so hard that it ricocheted off the wall. Shit! All three of them said at once and rushed to room 103. In slow motion, I followed, as though I were wading through a waking dream. The patient lay prone on her bed, with lifeless eyes pointed at the window. For a fraction of a second, I saw the figure of a man in a hat, raking fingers across the warped glass, but it was gone with the next blink. I rubbed my eyes hard enough for bright spots to explode behind my eyelids. Talia, startled, I croaked out a simple response. What? Get the doc. Dead as a doornail, he pronounced dramatically. All I could think about was that hat man and the way that door had flung open. This was more than me being tired and letting shadows dance in my imagination. I approached Taylor late in the night after the coroner had wheeled the body away. That door opened on its own, I told her. This building is drafty. It happens sometimes. You all knew to go check on 103, I argued. She's a complainer. Wanted to make sure she didn't get woken up. Cassie knew she was going to die. It's just a coincidence. Just tell me what is happening here, I shouted, shocking myself. I never raised my voice. Taylor's eyes grew wide at my outburst. I told you, Talia. Her voice was barely a whisper. The truth is what you make it. Be careful what you choose. Days and nights passed in such a blur that I could no longer define the edges. Only the occasional moment would flare out of the patterned obsolescence. Footsteps in an empty hall. A shadow falling from a still room. Another dissipated pen. A whisper over my shoulder. The press of a cold spot in a warm hallway. I wanted to be frightened, but it was becoming all too easy to dismiss it like everyone else did. Perhaps I would be just like everyone else in that hospital, donning the rose-colored glasses, ready to die rather than take them off for even a moment. Kim stopped us again. I steeled myself for her to cut me for my poor performance. Rosa has the flu. We don't have anyone who can cover her shift, so you all will have to take over some of the janitor duties, mostly turning over rooms. Why can't the guy janitor do it? Kim's face scrunched. There's only one night janitor. No, there isn't, Taylor added. We see the other guy all the time. He's just a bit of a jerk. I've seen him too. He's usually sweeping. She picked up her walkie. Charlie, can you come to my office really quick? Copy, the maintenance manager replied. He strode in. Yes, they are saying there's a male night janitor. Nah, don't have any males on staff right now. We see him all the time. Cassie's voice grew frantic. Pull the footage. He hangs in the back hall. Kim and Charlie shared a look, but relented, pulling the footage. We crowded behind them as they sped through tape after tape. There was nothing there. Well, the footage skips, right? The cameras are old. I'll tell you girls what. You see him again, give me a call and I'll come up. It was probably just Rosa. It wasn't Rosa. Taylor's voice was strained. Forget it. Cassie threw her arms up. Expect a call. She glared back as she stalked out of the room. If you truly feel someone is in the building who shouldn't be, please call the police and have them clear the building. They are just up the road and won't mind. We nodded, the animosity palpable in the air. The next shift we worked together had all of us on edge. It was refreshing to not be the only one bothered. Buzzing ran down my veins from the mixture of caffeine and sleeping pills that were keeping me alive. But my mind felt clearer than it had in weeks. I had rolled down my windows on the drive and sucked that cold air deep into my lungs over the bridge, letting it wash me clean. I've never actually seen him, Kate mused as we watched the monitors for a sign of the janitor. Is he cute? Kate, Taylor chided. Is that all you ever think about? Isn't Jason enough? She shrugged. Can't a girl look? He's old. He could probably be your dad. Taylor rolled her eyes. Kate wagged her eyebrows. Maybe I like 'em older. Taylor scowled with a disgusted look, but was interrupted before she could say more. There he is, Cassie hollered, jumping out of her chair so fast that it tipped over and clattered against the peeling linoleum. I knew it. Cass, where are you going? Kate called. I'm gonna go confront that asshole. Who's coming? They told us to call the police if we saw him again. Taylor argued. Oh, like that grumpy bastard is going to do anything. He's been hanging around here for years. You call them while I go tell him what's up. Kate snatched up a walkie. I'll go with her. Of course you will. Taylor muttered under her breath while she made phone calls. My eyes stayed trained on the feed. It almost seemed to crackle under my scrutiny. Never once did his sweeping falter. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The same spot over and over and over again. Hey, Taylor, isn't it odd? Cassie and Kate came into view. Their heads swung around, and Cassie threw up her arms and looked at the feed. Still the man kept sweeping, as though there weren't two girls right in front of him. Kate put the walkie up to her mouth. Where'd he go? My voice quivered as I answered. He's behind you. They swung around, searching in confusion before turning back to the camera. Nobody's there, Tal. He's right there. My voice rose an octave as panic clawed at my throat. Taylor joined me, staring for a second before picking up the walkie. What are y'all doing? He's right there. Cassie narrowed her eyes at the camera. and waved her arms in front of it. "We don't see anyone," Kate said, so slowly that it almost seemed as if he weren't moving at all. The sweeping ceased, and he turned to the camera, looking straight into it. A shot of ice pierced my heart as the shadows warped around his face until he was glowering at us. "Get out of there," Taylor's whispered into the walkie. Cassie and Kate bolted. We looked up when they came running around the corner, and when we turned back to the feed, he was gone. "What was that?" Kate started to cry, and Cassie's face was so pale I grew worried she might faint. "You really didn't see him?" Taylor asked as she guided Cassie to a chair. "Nobody was there," she cried, "but it got really cold, like somebody left the door open." The police and Charlie showed up shortly after. Everybody who had keyed into the building was accounted for when they checked the system. Pulling the feeds was useless. By the time Cassie and Kate showed up on screen, the video was skipping and wavering so much that it was hard to even discern them. "It wasn't like that," Taylor cried. "The feed was clear. We saw him. We all saw him. Probably just a trick of the light, or an old image superimposed. We will sweep the building again, but it looks like you girls have nothing to worry about other than an overactive imagination." We gaped at him, but there wasn't anything we could do. They didn't believe us. We were dismissed just as easily as everything else around there was. If anything, it would have been more surprising if they had admitted something was wrong. The truth is what you make it, I thought idly. Winter fell around us. He never showed up on the feeds again. It was just another anomaly that I doubted had ever really existed. One night I stared at the floor of the empty trauma bay. Strange shadows seemed to scuff the floor under the bed. I snagged one of the purple wipes and tried to wipe it away, but it didn't budge, even when my fingers turned red and started to burn from scrubbing. "It won't go away," Taylor said behind me as she came in to restock the cabinets. "What is it? I don't remember this being here before." She looked me in the eye, her voice void of all emotion. "Blood. Blood doesn't do that." She slammed the cabinet shut. "The floors are old. They need replaced." I watched over the next few shifts, and even so much as a drop of blood on the floor left a small shadow behind. How had I never noticed before? Subtly, I started lying down towels or positioning any potential blood spill over rubber mats. Something about the little shadows opened a pit in my stomach. We were slower than we had been since I had started there. A handful of patients were in the 100 hall, and the ER visits tapered off until the night was dead. The patients had been fast asleep for hours, and we milled about the nurses' station, buried in our phones. After the incident with the janitor, our conversations had died to near zero. It surprised me when Cassie smacked my arm and pointed to the monitors. Each of the feeds slowly dimmed until they were too dark to much more than vague shadows. Taylor grabbed the mouse and circled it around, trying to wake it up to no avail. The phone rang, and we all jumped. Cassie picked up and dropped it, once before nesting it into her shoulder and offering a greeting. "Hello?" Her face wrinkled in confusion. "Hello, I can't hear you." "Who is it?" Kate asked. She shrugged. "I just hear whispers. Let me hear." She pressed it to her ear and frowned before passing it around to each of us. I listened close, only hearing a whisper, too soft to discern anything more than that it was a voice. At first I thought it was female, but then the tone would shift, and I wasn't sure anymore. It reminded me of the quiet prayers they had played daily over the intercom systems in a Catholic hospital I had worked at once. Cold sweat started to break the longer I listened, and my throat went dry. I slammed the phone down and looked at the others. Maybe it was bad service. They'll call back later if it's important. Footsteps sounded down the 100 hall. We all stood up, but nobody was there. Cassie opened her mouth as though she were about to say something when the lights flickered out in a procession down both hallways before stuttering back on. We huddled together behind the nurse's station. Taylor's voice wavered. "It's windy. It messes with the power grid." As if on cue, the wind outside whipped up into an eerie howl. The ceiling tiles seemed to shake, and a thin powder of dust rained down, making the air thick around us. The phone started to ring again, and Kate picked it up quickly before slamming it back down. Again, it rang. Again, she hung up. Outside, the wind pressed harder against the building until its howl was shaking the window panes. "Help! Help me! Someone! Please!" A voice screamed down the hall. Pressing our fears aside, we ran to the patient rooms, each of us taking one. I stopped in front of room 203. The patient was fast asleep. As I looked to the others, they nodded their heads to affirm that everyone was where they were supposed to be. "Help! Please, God, help me!" That's coming from down the 200 hall. There aren't any patients in that hall tonight. An ER patient. The last one left hours ago. Silence impregnated the air as we collectively held our breath. "Why?" The voice wailed. "Please, please don't. Help me." "Maybe it's the lab girl?" Kate's voice was a whimper. Taylor snatched the walkie. "Lab copy." Seconds that felt like hours passed before we got a response. "Copy. Are you okay?" "Yeah, just chilling. What's up? Where's Julie? Is she in the radiology room?" "She's sleeping in the lounge. Y'all need imaging? I can get her. Someone's yelling for help down the 200 hall. Okay? Probably just a patient," she said before dropping off. "Leave me alone." Pain saturated the voice so thick that my teeth ached. We huddled closer as our arms clutched each other. The lights started going out one by one until only the one above our station was left. The eerie glow of exit signs were the only splashes of color down the halls, right as another gust of wind picked up. It sounded as though the roof were peeling off. "God, please help me." The voice devolved into a garbled whimper. "I think it's the CT room," Taylor said, tears streaking down her face. Kim snatched a phone off the counter and dialed 911, keeping her voice low and steady, despite the panic in her eyes. Down the 200 hall, I watched the CT room door that was firmly shut. Nobody went in there at night. It was a heavy door anyway, difficult to open. The shadows warped, sticking to the darkest corners and swelling with each scream of the wind. I narrowed my eyes as sickeningly familiar figures seemed to manifest in the darkness before breaking away into nothing. "We have to go check," Cassie said with more bravado than I thought possible. "Someone needs help. We can't just stand there." "What? And find them just like you found that janitor?" Taylor hissed. "She's right," I added. "I don't think it's safe. Please help me." The voice sobbed. "That's it. I'm going." Cassie pulled away and I grabbed her arm, the others following in suit. "Let me go," she thrashed. "The police will be here any minute. Just wait," Kate begged. As if on cue, the lights all flashed back on, and the wind died right as the grief room door slammed open, swinging back and forth with a terrible squeak from the momentum. A banging from the front door caught our attention, and before any of us managed to get up, the police breached with guns drawn. They filed down the hall and gave the door 3 hard kicks before it finally gave way. Afraid to so much as breathe, we waited an eternity before one of the cops came running out, pale and clammy. "We need medical assistance," Kate paged the doctor, while the rest of us took off running down the hall. Nothing could have prepared me for that room. The patient from room 203 was sprawled across the ground. Her eyes were milky and wide. An expression of pure horror stretched her face into a grotesque scream that was frozen in death. Bones jutted from her ankle, her foot hanging on with stringy tendons. It was cracked at a 90-degree angle with mangled flesh gaping through the break. Blood formed a haloed pool around her as it saturated her thin white hair, matting it down in clumps. We were escorted away from the scene and wrapped in blankets outside. I stared off into the trees that seemed sinister in the glow of the swirling red and blue lights. Everything happened as though we were in slow motion. Voices were garbled and distorted as they asked question after question. They had to repeat them 3 times before I was able to comprehend, let alone form a response. Eventually, we were cleared to leave. Her body was wrapped up in a bag and hauled away. The managers reviewed footage and found nothing to condemn our actions, and the administration was quick to sweep everything under the rug. They labeled it a freak accident. I knew the drill and didn't bother to wait for them to cut my contract short. I simply left and waited for my recruiter to call. "You're starting to get a reputation, Talia. It's getting harder to find contracts for you. What do you have this time?" There was a sigh from the other end and a shuffling of papers. "I'll email you the info. Can you just do me a favor this time? No more mysterious deaths on shift, please." I was tired of it, too. It wasn't fair that I couldn't ignore the shadows like everyone else. Every time I turned my hands over, the blotches blooming my skin seemed to darken, like the stains that would forever mark the floor of the CT room. No matter how many times I scrubbed them, they continued to mock me. Even chemical peels and shaving off a layer of skin with a knife hadn't touched them. "I'll take it," I told her before hanging up. The road ahead was my only comfort as I drove on into the endless charade of my life, always the traveler. Story number 4. When I was 8 years old, my family moved away from our busy home in the city to a small, sleepy town in the countryside. My dad had gotten a new job, you see, at the nuclear power plant. The plant loomed over the town, its chimneys coughing out thick smoke onto the houses. Our homes almost seemed like an afterthought, protruding from the side of the plant like a sudden growth, when its creators realized too late that their workers would need somewhere to live. We lived on Strand Street, to the east of Building A. Although it was long ago now, I still remember the day we moved very clearly. As soon as we came into view of the towers, the air seemed to feel heavy. It was as if a damp, thick blanket had been pulled up over me, pressing down on my shoulders. When I took a labored breath, my mouth filled with an odd chemical taste. I rolled up my window. The sun was only just beginning to set. We'd been rushing around all day trying to cram the last of our things into the car. And yet the town was deserted. I pressed my face against the glass to try and peer into the windows of houses as we drove past, but it didn't seem like anyone was home at all. Each window pane was fully covered from the inside, not allowing even a speck of light to poke through. "I'm sure there'll be lots of other children in our street, Charlie," said my mum, seeming to read my mind. She turned around, squeezing my hand. I tried to smile. "That's our house right there," chimed Dad, pointing to a small brick house at the end of the terrace. As he tried his best to park on the narrow road, I noticed a couple walking very quickly past us, carrying gray shopping bags. They glanced behind them every now and then, as if they were being followed by something only they could see. They finally stopped at a house just a few doors down from ours, and the woman let out a breath she'd been holding. She then began to point towards us and whisper something to the man, who was already staring worriedly at my parents as they unpacked the car. I hopped out and stood close to my dad, who was enthusiastically shaking the man's hand and introducing us. My dad was the type of person who could quickly become friends with anyone he met. whether they wanted to or not. The man, Mr. Grieg, looked a little uncomfortable and began glancing over his shoulder again. Mrs. Grieg wrung her hands together and began to talk to my parents when she was suddenly interrupted by a knock on their window. Inside, a boy about my age was poking his head through the thick curtains as if he was searching for something. He looked down at me and broke into a wide grin, showing off a missing front tooth. As quickly as he appeared, the window was now empty, and we heard thundering footsteps from inside the house. Mrs. Grieg turned on her heel and almost ran towards the house in an attempt to herd the boy back in. He came flying down the street, nevertheless, almost bowling me over. "I'm Toby," he said, barely waiting for me to introduce myself before asking about the book in my hand and talking a mile a minute about how he had just started reading that series too, and what was my favorite character, and had I got to the really scary bit. The Greek stood on looking nervous, and my mum gently shooed Toby and I indoors to go and find my new room. As I followed Toby and listened to his excited chatter echoing around our empty house, I looked back to see the Griegs talking in hushed tones to my parents. The smile had worn off my dad's face, and him and my mum now had the same look of fear I had just seen on Toby's parents. My mum had told me weeks before, when my dad had gotten his job, that the move would take some getting used to. Some things were easier than others. I loved having my own room. There was so much more space to play than in our little flat. Even the new junior school didn't seem so scary, now that I would have Toby by my side in September. But some things took a little longer to take in. Toby and I could spend hours happily playing in the road, kicking round an old football, or running about being pirates. But each day, when the sun began to set, our mothers would appear on the doorstep and hurriedly call us inside. My mum wasn't quite on the same level as Toby's yet. Mrs. Grieg seemed to permanently hover behind her door, just waiting for an alarm to go off in her head so she could call him in. Toby, on the other hand, wasn't fazed at all about the curfew. When he heard his mum call, he would roll his eyes before smiling at me and jumping up from the patch of pavement serving as our ship and jogging off to his house. For me and my mum, however, the routine felt strange. My mum had always been caring to me, of course, but had never seemed half as worried when we lived in the city. I could spend all day in the park, across the road, reading my book on the swings, only coming in for dinner once it had already gone dark. But now she would look almost scared as she waited for me to walk the short distance to our house, her frown only easing once I was inside with the door shut. My dad would return home a little while later, walking alongside Mr. Grieg after they finished their workday. Dad slid a bolt on the door when he came in. We'd close all the curtains and then sit and eat our dinner, accompanied by the ever-present humming of the plant. A few weeks later, I was almost used to our strange new routine. Something which did still get to me, however, was the noise. Even though I was used to the bustle of the city with all the traffic and people, there was something different about the noise of the plant. It wasn't even a constant humming. On the days when the acrid smoke was at its thickest, it was a grinding, groaning, booming screech that made the ground shake slightly. I mentioned this to Toby, who held his hand up to his ear and said, "Oh yeah," as if he was hearing it for the first time. "I guess you get used to it after a while. We've been here a year now. Maybe if you're here a year, you won't hear it either." He reassured me. "I don't know how you couldn't hear it. It's everywhere, even in my house," I lamented. Toby thought for a while, and then spoke again in an uncharacteristically quiet voice. "Well, there is somewhere where you can't hear it. But it's quite far away," he added hurriedly, already seeing the smile on my face. So far, I hadn't ventured further than a couple of streets away. I felt cooped up and just wanted to explore. It's still very bright, though, isn't it? I asked him, looking up at the sky. Toby looked at his dinosaur watch, up to the sky, and to my hopeful face in quick succession. I'm sure we've got time, he decided. Let's go. Toby led the way, his trainers thudding down the pavement. Wait a minute, I called, the thick air burning my lungs as I struggled to keep up. Toby whipped around, seeming concerned about both my increasingly red face and the seconds ticking away on his watch. We compromised with a brisk walk, trying to ignore the streetlights flickering on one by one. Eventually, the pavement faded into a worn-down path, with grass and dandelions creeping up out of every crack. The air began to feel still and cool. It felt as though the plant was loosening its grip on me. I'd forgotten what it was like to breathe so easily. There, said Toby, his face flush with pride. We'd come into a clearing, surrounded by trees and covered in a lush blanket of grass. Wildflowers were dotted about, pastel shades of purple, blue, and pink amidst the sea of green. The last few rays of sunlight shimmered on a bubbling stream, over which stood a quaint brick bridge. I couldn't believe the starkness of this wonderful place to Strand Street. I'd stepped out of a black and white picture and into dazzling technicolor, but the best part of all was the quiet. As Toby had promised, all that could be heard in the clearing was the soft running of the stream and the breeze blowing in the trees. See, I told you, Charlie, he said, his face lit up with excitement. It's nice here, isn't it? I could have stayed there forever. We picked flowers, felt the soft grass on our toes, chucked poo sticks over the side of the bridge, and excitedly watched them sail down the stream. I felt a lightness in my chest, and a sense of freedom I'd not felt since we left the city. We climbed trees, looked for fish in the brook, and watched the sun disappear down past the horizon. The sunset, the time, the rules. It had suddenly gotten very, very dark. Although the rules had become part of our DNA, it was difficult to grapple with the new and pestering longing to stay in the clearing for even 5 minutes more. Our parents will be cross, said Toby, still looking wistfully towards the bridge. Then with a reluctant sigh, he turned back towards me. We'll come another day. I dropped my flowers and began ambling after Toby, back towards the gray. But as we headed back, things seemed different to how they had before. In the dark, the tree branches reached out over us like bony fingers, blotting out the last of the light. The plant's groaning started up again, snatching away the last comforting sounds of the clearing. Then there was a new sound, a rustling behind us, following us. Toby didn't say anything, but he took my little hand into his, and we walked just a half a step faster. The rustling came again, this time closer. Let's run, Toby whispered, his voice tight with fear. As we sped up, the rustling did too. It was louder, more frantic, like a creature on the hunt. Right as the street lamps came into view, we heard it. A loud, screeching, painful sound. The thing made a screaming howl, deep and primal, that almost knocked us off our feet. This was followed by several sharp, unnatural clicks. Whatever it was big. I didn't realize I had tripped until I smacked down hard on the pavement, scraping my knees raw and narrowly avoiding taking Toby down with me. He was too panicked to speak, desperately pulling me up. It wasn't working. I was stuck in something black. It was like a thick puddle of tar, but it was moving, gliding towards us at an unnatural speed. The noises came from somewhere deep within it, shooting out of a gaping hole in its core. 2 spindly arms began to reach from the creature. The clicks and grunts were in my ear now, and the ooze was burning my feet as I tried to wiggle them free. It had just reached my knees when Toby finally gave a strong heave, and then we were back on our feet. We ran and ran and ran. Things became a blur. I remember nearly falling over the threshold in my desperate attempt to get inside. My parents slammed the door behind us, locking and bolting it, and being shoved to the ground by the thing throwing itself against the door. It wasn't finished with us yet. Toby's mum ushered us away as my parents pushed back against it. I had been in such a rush to get inside, to get away from that thing, that I hadn't noticed what it had done to my legs. The skin on my shins had melted, sloughing off to reveal red-hot and angry patches of flesh that had soaked my shoes in blood. Toby looked down at them and started to cry. He hadn't let go of my hand. We did separate finally, when Mrs. Grieg began to clean the wounds, and Toby came over all faint and needed to lay down. Mrs. Grieg picked fibers out of my raw flesh, where my socks had melted into my skin. I tried my best to look away, but then my focus would drift to the insistent banging on the door, and I wasn't sure which was worse. I turned my attention to Mrs. Grieg instead, who was now dressing my legs with all the care and precision of a surgeon. It was as if she had done this before, like she was prepared for this. Once the banging had stopped, and the thing seemed to have retreated, Mrs. Grieg needed to treat another casualty. My mum. She'd been leaning against the door when the same acid that got my legs had suddenly burst through the letterbox, leaving a big searing rectangle on her shoulder. Later, Mrs. Grieg pulled Toby aside and told him that his dad was missing. She explained that when he and my dad came home and found our terrified mothers unable to find us, Mr. Grieg went out to search. He hadn't come back. Things were strange afterwards. My dad still smiled at me, but it never quite reached his eyes. He went to work and came home, bolting the door which had stayed shut since he left that morning. We saw the Griegs sometimes, though they mostly stayed indoors now, too. I'd sometimes catch a glimpse of a tired-looking Toby rushing by, superglued to his mum's side. He wasn't the same boy I'd known before. He'd come over sometimes, following Mrs. Grieg as she helped my mum and I with our healing burns, putting on a special cream that made them sting. Toby and I could never quite look at one another, though. I knew he was feeling the same guilt I was, and it had made us wary of one another, as if we knew that at any moment, either of us could make a decision again that put us right back in that situation. Nobody looked for Mr. Grieg. Life went on. People on the street went to work. The plant kept on chugging. Mum bought me long school trousers to wear. I tried not to itch my healing legs. I tried not to think about the clearing and how much I wanted to go there again. I felt guilty when I did want to. Toby and I moved through school, going through the motions. We eventually grew close again, but never talked about what had happened that night. We walked home from school together, chatting away happily as if we were children again, laughing without a care in the world. One day, though, I wasn't thinking, and halfway through a story about a silly thing my dad had done years ago, I looked up to see Toby's downcast face. "Sorry, Toby," I said, patting his arm. "I miss him." He sighed. "I wish we could at least talk about him, but it's..." He trailed off, nodding his head towards his door, where we knew his mum was waiting. "He's still with you," I said. Toby gave a small smile before stepping inside. Over the years, things took their toll on my parents. They would wait until they thought I was asleep to argue, sometimes shouting into the early hours of the morning. I would tuck myself tight into my duvet, holding my teddy over one ear and my hand against the other to try and block out the sound, even when I had become much too old for that. Sometimes I would hear my mum's shouting. On bad nights, she would drag up that night, about our burns and whatever had happened to Mr. Grieg. My dad didn't usually have anything to say at all. It was a bad night tonight. It had been 8 years since the day we were followed home. My legs had calmed from an angry red to a scarred pink. They still ached, though, as I tiptoed out onto the landing to try and hear what my mum was shouting about. "It's not worth it, Nick. It's not worth it," she screamed. They worried less about me hearing them as I got older. Maybe I should be used to it. I still held my teddy close to my chest and tried hard to hold back the tears, feeling childish. I jumped suddenly as I heard the bolt of the door slide open and then a hard slam. I crept down the stairs, seeing my dad, alone, in the hallway. "Dad?" I called out. I think because the changes had been over so many years, I didn't take much notice of them. My dad had never been the biggest man, but looking at him now I could see how much smaller he had become. He was thin and hunched over slightly, probably from the years of labor at the plant. He'd lost his hair and spent more time coughing than talking these days. He'd lost his smile long ago. He'd lost himself then, too. "She's gone," he whispered, staring past the open doorway. It took me a couple seconds to realize what that meant. My mum had gone outside, at night, in the dark, where that thing would be. If my dad felt anything, it didn't show. He stood in the hall, his bony hands twitching. He didn't say anything either when I pulled on my coat and slipped past him, out the door and into the dark. It was already ink black outside. The street lamps flickered like a flame about to extinguish. I heard a slam to my left and felt my legs buckle. "Charlie," Toby's voice shot out. He shut his door, not bothering to be quiet. Like my dad, Mrs. Grieg seemed to have given up long ago. "Toby, it's my mum, I saw her. She went down there," Toby said, gesturing towards a winding alleyway that cut through the back of the terrace row. "Come on," he said, putting on a brave face. "I'll come with you." We walked side by side down the alley, straining to listen for any sign of my mum, and hearing only the plant's screeching groans. The earth shook beneath us, making pebbles bounce against the pavement. I breathed in the sickly chemical smell, and my heart began to pound. We checked behind us every now and then, but our parents never followed. We heard a sudden splitting scream from what sounded like the next street over. My heart skipped a beat, and Toby reached out, gripping my hand. We continued down the alley, and I began to hear a noise that had been echoing in my nightmares for the past 8 years. Click, 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 click. Toby's grip tightened. "It's okay," I lied, not sure who I was trying to reassure. I took a tentative step forward. I felt like I was teetering along the edge of a bear pit. The clicking sounded again, this time closer. The alleyway began to close in on us. We were going head-to-head with the creature again, and this time we had backed ourselves into a corner. The creature was well aware of this, taking its time to make a grand entrance. Tar began to seep along the ground, hissing and bubbling. My legs began to burn just looking at it, and as I lifted my feet to run, gallons of the stuff began to surround us. I watched it dissolve a stone in its path, and a cold dread gripped my insides as I prayed we would go quickly too once it reached us. Then its arms appeared, reaching slowly from the bubbling tar, and without warning, a face shot forward. It was so much worse than I remembered. A hideous screech tore from its throat, spraying tar, which landed just a hair away from Toby's head. It rose above us, a body appearing and contorting violently before slamming down again. It crawled on its front towards us, its mangled fingers digging into the concrete. The tar slipped away for a split second, and I saw a hand that could almost be human. It was all sinew and muscle, as if the black tar was its flesh. It twisted again violently, letting out another agonized howl as tar began to surround us. Just as it twisted, more tar slipped away. A human's back appeared. The plant was screeching louder than ever. The earth shook and a deep rumbling came from inside. Heat began to radiate off of the creature, and I gagged as smoke began to fill my lungs. Toby looked over at me with a look on his face I had never seen before. Determined, resolute. He looked over at the archway behind the creature, which had widened as the tar ate up each brick it touched. He looked back at me with a faint, sad smile. "You'll be okay, Charlie," he said, softly, and then he let go of my hand. I screamed when I saw him run, bouncing off the wall and landing in a puddle of tar which sizzled against his shoes. He was out of the alleyway in seconds, leaving me alone with the creature. It looked at me, the face featureless besides a twisted, open mouth. It let out a final, blood-curdling howl before spinning around, following Toby out of the alley and into the dark. The tar came unstuck from the ground and was swept behind the creature, taking a layer of concrete with it. Everything became blurry, and I finally let the tears fall from my eyes. I tried to listen for any sounds of Toby, any sign that he was out there, but all that echoed through the night was the rumblings of the plant as it slowed back down into its regular rhythm. I've always found it difficult to keep up with Toby. He moves a mile a minute, and so do his thoughts. I wondered for a second how he could have known that his gamble would work, that the creature would choose him instead. He must have seen what I saw, too, when the creature's back was exposed, a large letterbox-shaped scar on the shoulder. Story number 5. I've always been a fighter. I was born too early and had to fight just to survive. Then life said that was an easy fight. My mother gave birth to twins 2 years later. On my 10th birthday, I had to fight my uncle for stealing our rent money. At 13, my mother had a mental breakdown, and now I'm a child raising 2 preteens and taking care of an adult. I never had what people call a childhood. No, my upbringing was more aligned with a battleground. When we didn't have much food in the fridge or cabinets, I'd go out and steal what we needed. My mom knew, and yet she didn't care. "So long as the kids have food," she would say, with chip crumbs on her chest. To say I hate my mother would be an understatement. There was a defining moment in high school. I got caught stealing a lighter with a Grim Reaper printed on it. I started stealing out of boredom more than survival. Around the same time, my mother's mental health was declining faster every day. When my mom arrived at the police station, I knew it from what the uniforms were saying. "Nah, man, cowboy hat, cowboy boots, and goddamned Daisy Dukes." When the uniforms left, I just tilted my head back and sighed. Not from frustration or relief. No, it was still from boredom. That's when I met him for the first time. In the corner of the small room stood a man that wasn't there before. He had a grin on his face like he was watching a movie for the 7th time, and his favorite scene was about to come on. He was opening and closing a golden Zippo lighter. When he finally snapped it shut one last time, I saw a stylized, scripted letter, D, on it. "You look bored," said the Zippo man. I just stared at him. I could feel my face settling into cold indifference, the face I would wear whenever I thought I was looking at someone with authority. His grin turned into a smirk when I didn't reply. The next 2 words he whispered gave me nightmares. His eyes flashed golden and his lips barely moved when he said, "Watch this." He snapped his fingers and vanished. Then my mom walked through the door and told me the police were using witchcraft, and we needed to leave. Her delusions had now evolved to include witchcraft. I just shook my head and walked out with her. When the cops returned the stuff from my pockets, They also gave me a golden Zippo I didn't have before. When I tried giving it back, the cop insisted I keep it. That was 20 years ago. My mom's long gone. My siblings live out of state. As for me, I'm finally settling some old scores in a way that only a kid who's had to fight his whole life can. I don't need witchcraft. I don't need demons. And I don't need pride. You see, the spirits of the desert didn't like that they lost their desert son and the secrets I took with me. I'm no longer a child wearing indifference like sunglasses. I have a purpose now, and I sure as hell ain't bored anymore. I destroyed the lighter last night. I accepted I deserve hell. I've led so many people down the path of darkness without even realizing it. I didn't know people were watching and being influenced. Others wearing indifference like it was in style. What I also know is I can't save myself from my fate. That's just facts. You see, now something else is living in me. It's burning inside, and it's helping me finally make a difference in this fight. Death has no power over me now. I'm not fighting for victory anymore. I'm fighting from victory. I've got a new name, and it's written in a book I never knew existed. Are you ready to finish my story, old man? I say to a man sitting at the cafe's small table, overlooking his tea. Not bored anymore? He says with a Cajun accent. I look at him with amusement painted on my face. I can feel my expression shift as I look into his eyes. My eyes start to turn to steel. My lips fall to a neutral placement. My shoulders relax. I leave the cafe without my coffee. He's baiting me. I think to myself, if I fight him now, everything I'm doing will be lost. Funny, I have things to lose now. I've got an entire police force to look into before anything. There are also others who need to hear the truth. They deserve to be given a choice. Even if they make the wrong one, they need to know choices exist. If you see this man with his Zippo, just know he's a liar. He only offers pain and suffering wrapped in golden lies. Story number 6. My name was Diana. I'd like to share my story here, because I know many of you are believers of things that most would never think twice about. I don't know where I go from here, or what I truly am. I am terrified of what this means for you all. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. This is my story. I'll start at the beginning. The first voicemail came at 3:12 a.m. I didn't even hear the phone ring. The number was completely unfamiliar, unlisted, and when I checked it was also untraceable. I sat down on my bed and listened to it, thinking maybe it was a mistake, maybe a grieving mother or some drunk, lonely man. The voice on the other end was eerily calm, measured even. It was familiar in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck stand at attention. Hey, it's okay. Just wanted to let you know that we're ready. We're safe now. You did so good. You can come back. The voice on the other end paused. We miss you. Click. I sat for a long time with my phone in hand, replaying the message. The voice was like something out of a dream, like it was just known but couldn't be placed, but you recognize it in your bones. She said my name, not Diana or Anna, the way my mother used to call me when she needed to talk, to hear my voice. She had the exact cadence, like she knew exactly who I was, and even stranger still, for a woman that doesn't cry. I couldn't help the strangled sob that escaped my lips. I cried myself to sleep, and when I woke the next morning, I wrote it off as a prank. Someone had just got a lucky guess, maybe a friend doing too much. I couldn't shake the way it made me feel, like homesick for a place that I don't remember. So I deleted the voicemail. It was back in my notification window by lunch. The next few days, things got weirder. Small things, then bigger. Things I couldn't ignore or write off. My favorite coffee tasted like nothing. like my taste buds stopped working. The streetlight outside my house started blinking in a pattern I became convinced was Morse code. When I transcribed it, though, it spelled nothing. Or maybe it was something I just couldn't understand. Each night, the spaces in the pattern got longer. One night I came home from work to find a dark bruise on my left shoulder. It was tender, but undeniably old. Weeks old. I didn't remember any pain or any way I could have bruised myself like that. Then there was the scratches, faint lines, symmetrical, like something with precision had grabbed me or adjusted me. I checked my sleep app, of course. There were no disturbances, just completely uninterrupted rest. It was recorded as deep sleep. Every night. I have insomnia. It was too perfect. Then the dreams began. Vast, the black tunnels beneath a burning sky. A council of faceless shapes waiting in silence. I stood before them all, tall, alien, and beloved. I remember speaking, but not the words. Just a feeling of great importance, of command, and one singular phrase that lingered even after waking. Death is just the body ending. Memory is the real self. The second voicemail came a week later. This time, the voice on the other end sounded different, pained and pleading. You told us to wait, but it's been so long. Some of us didn't make it. Some forgot you completely. But we didn't. Not all of us. You said you'd come back when it was safe. It's safe now. Come back. Please. My hands shook like leaves as I played it. Something inside me shifted as I heard it, like a gear clicking back into place. When I opened my eyes again, the light in my apartment was wrong. The angle was off. It was slight, but definitely different. The TV moved several inches to the left on its mount on the wall. That night when I went to bed, a note waited for me on my nightstand. In my own handwriting, I live by myself. Do not answer if they call again. Don't listen to those voicemails. You are not supposed to remember. You are not stable. Stay asleep. I ran to the bathroom and burned the note in the sink, searing the wretched thing from this world. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The days that followed, I began seeing people who weren't real. I don't know how else to explain it. Their movement were too precise. Their faces too still. The way they blinked with rhythm. And they watched me, but only when they thought I wasn't looking at them. In the corner of my vision, shapes loomed and flickered, and the sky was unexplainable. The blue was wrong. Too heavy, like it had been painted over something else. I looked into the mirror one morning before work, and my reflection smiled first. I went to my doctor demanding scan after scan, a full workup, but the doctor, he smiled too much, asked questions that had nothing to do with my checkup. Do you remember your point of entry, Diana? What year did you say this was again? Does it still hurt when you wake up? I left the doctor feeling more delusional than when I went in. That night I turned my phone completely off. At 3:12 a.m., it rang anyway. There was no ringtone, just vibration, low and steady, like the hum of something deep underground. I didn't answer it. When I looked up, my window was no longer facing the street like it should be. It faced another window. In the window I saw myself. She was thinner, taller. Her eyes were too dark, and she was staring back, smiling. I went to bed that night, and when I woke up, my bed was gone. The air was different, thicker, like breathing underwater. The walls glistened like sweaty skin. It was organic. The room was the size of a cathedral, but it pulsed like a lung. And across the chamber stood something, almost human, but not. Too many eyes, no mouth. But when it spoke, it was with the same voice, from the voicemails. Welcome back, instructor. Behind the being was rows of them. Students, followers, whatever they are. They stood waiting. We kept the memory intact as long as we could. You asked us to. Was it peaceful? The dream? I couldn't speak. I wanted to scream or run, but something ancient in my blood told me, no, this is real. The rest was a dream. The creature stepped forward. She placed a hand-smooth, glowing rong on my shoulder. They need you again. We all do. Like a chorus of warbled nonsense, they all spoke at once. You've always been here. Story number 7. Have you ever had a recurring dream? I mean the kind of dream you've had since you were little, and that every now and then somehow returns. It's like watching the same movie over and over again. You know how it starts, what happens in the middle, and how it ends. Sometimes, even while asleep, you're aware of the dream as it unfolds, like some strange form of déjà vu. Since I was very young, I've had a recurring dream that comes and goes in phases. It's so vivid in my memory that I often go to bed afraid I'll see it again. I'm not sure what it means. I've heard that recurring dreams, especially those that play out the same way, might be tied to unresolved issues in real life. But honestly, what do I know? I'm only 25, and I've never experienced anything in waking life that resembles what happens in that dream. Some psychologists say that the more you repeat the same dream, the more it morphs into a nightmare. And for as long as I can remember, this particular dream has always felt like one. From the very first time, I knew it was something dark. Not many people know this about me, but my parents noticed something strange about me when I was little. They say that when I was around 4 years old, I used to wake them in the middle of the night, terrified, claiming I saw pale faces staring at me from within my bedroom. On more than one occasion, I pointed out a little girl with cinnamon-colored skin who came to play with me at night. That detail really frightened them. They say I would talk to myself in the dark, pleading with that girl to leave, telling her I didn't want to play. I don't remember that stage of my life clearly. Who does at 4 years old? But I suppose something like that could leave a lasting mark. I never really gave those visions much importance. On top of that, my parents are very religious, so they paid close attention to everything I told them and would often pray over me, which brought me some peace, at least for a while. I don't know if I'm sensitive to those kinds of things, but I've had so many experiences in my life that people might label as paranormal. Anyway, that's not really what I want to talk about. What I've wondered for years is whether all of that, the visions, the girl, the prayers, has anything to do with the dream, especially now that it's begun to change in ways that deeply disturb me. I first had the dream when I was about 6 years old. Since then, it has reappeared occasionally throughout my life. It always starts in the same way. I'm in a dark, silent room. I know it's a room in a house because I can feel that I'm sitting on one of those thick, fuzzy carpets that were popular in bedrooms during the 90s and early 2000s. As I said, there's total silence at first, but then a light flickers on. It comes from an enormous TV set, sitting less than 2 meters from me in the corner of the room. That's when I notice the walls are stark white, and there are no windows. The screen is full of static, and then the sounds begin. Those cursed sounds I've never been able to forget. The ones I dread every time I have this nightmare. They're not quite cries, but that's the closest word I can find. It's like deep, mechanical wailing, painful moans distorted as if coming from a synthesizer or some strange machine. The closest thing I can compare them to is the way characters speak in the game Faith, the unholy trinity. Incidentally, when I played that game for the first time, I nearly screamed. The sounds were exactly like the ones in my nightmare. The cries grow louder, building and building. until suddenly they stop. That's when the grotesque images start flashing across the screen, one after another, twisted, horrifying images that seem ripped from the deepest corners of my subconscious. These images have changed over time. I don't remember what they looked like when I was 6, but I do know that as I grew up, they often mirrored the fears I had during different parts of my childhood. Monsters, scenes of violence, depictions of hell, impossible figures, children crying, all of that and more, shown one after another, burning themselves into my mind. What's strange is that no matter how hard I try to look away in the dream, the TV moves, impossibly, toward whichever corner I turn to. If I try to shut my eyes, it doesn't matter. Even with my eyelids closed, I can still see the screen. I remember that at first I tried to unplug the damn thing, but it didn't work. The images would keep playing, and I'd be forced to watch again and again. And just like that, the volume would return, so loud it felt like my ears were going to explode. That's usually when I'd wake up, drenched in sweat. Like I said, I've had this dream countless times. The images on the screen may change, but the fear always remains the same. I've learned that when I relive familiar dreams, I can usually anticipate what's coming and wake myself up before things get too scary. But with this dream, that doesn't work. Years ago, I gave up. Every time the TV turned on, I'd just brace myself. I stopped trying to unplug it. I knew that if I endured it, eventually it would end. But something changed about a year ago. In May 2024, I had the dream again. I expected it to unfold the same as always. But for some reason, I decided to try unplugging the TV again. In the dream, I reached behind the screen to pull the power cord. And that's when it happened. Something grabbed my hand. For the first time ever, I woke up before the nightmare reached its usual conclusion. That moment, that touch, shook me to the core. After all those years of seeing the same thing, the fact that something changed terrified me. I thought about it for days, and every time I remembered the feeling of that hand, it seemed strangely familiar. But at the same time, it filled me with pure dread. What scared me even more is that after that night, the dream stopped. In the past, the longest I ever went without it was about 5 months. But this time, nothing. Not until a few days ago. That's why I'm writing this, my hands shaking as I glance around my room. A week ago, I had the nightmare again. Everything started the same. I recognized the carpet. I waited for the TV to flicker on. I braced myself, wondering what horrors it would show me this time. But the screen stayed black. I waited. Nothing. And then I started to panic. I could feel the TV, the static, the hum of electricity in the room. It was there. But the screen wouldn't light up. So I moved toward it, feeling my way through the dark. I found it. Cold. Solid. Just like always. I reached behind it, trying to find the power cable. I was desperate. I can't explain it, but something inside me wanted the TV to turn on. It was horrifying, yes, but familiar. There was some twisted comfort in knowing what was supposed to come next. But there was no cable. There was no outlet. Frantic, I returned to where I'd been sitting. I was gasping, heart racing, surrounded by pitch blackness. And that's when I felt the hand again, grabbing mine in the dark. It felt warm, familiar, but it terrified me. A deep ancestral fear that stirred memories I didn't even know I had. Her cold fingers brought back flashes of a past I never fully understood. Suddenly the screen turned on, bathing the room in white light, and I saw her. The woman holding my hand had cinnamon-colored skin. Her face was covered in burns and held together by black stitches. Her eyes had no pupils, but I knew she was staring right at me. She smiled. That awful, knowing smile. as if she was waiting for me to smile back. I woke up, soaked in sweat, my heart pounding. I jumped into a cold shower because my skin felt like it was burning. I'm writing this a few days later. I've set alarms to wake me up every 2 hours so I don't dream long enough to return to that place. Because I know she's still there, waiting me to play together. And once again, I don't want to play with her. Story number 8. It began during my second year of college, the night before my organic chemistry final. I hadn't slept. I couldn't afford to. My hands trembled as I tried, for the 10th time, to make sense of the same sentence, the words swimming uselessly across the page like ink in water, everywhere but in my brain. The clock ticked on in the background, each second a slow, deliberate heartbeat, echoing in my skull like a countdown to failure. With every tick, time seemed to taunt me. Midnight. 1, 2. The air in the room was thick, stale with sweat, caffeine, and desperation. My shirt clung to my back. The walls felt too close. My eyes burned from staring, unblinking at the same lines of notes that refused to sink in. I told myself if I just focused a little longer, just pushed a little harder, I could cram enough knowledge into my brain to scrape by. Just enough to survive. Just enough not to fail this one time. But the truth was, I was already unraveling under the pressure, and time wasn't slowing down for anyone. At around 4 a.m., I allowed myself a small bathroom break. I grabbed an empty glass to fill with water. Out of habit, I looked up, bleary-eyed, into the mirror above the sink. For a second, I thought I saw something move behind me. Something tall and dark, where there shouldn't have been anything at all. I turned around. Nothing. Just the clutter of the room, perfectly reflected into the dirty glass, right in the middle of which was my pitiful face. The face of a dumb idiot, of one who was yet again unable to plan ahead instead of cramming all his efforts into a last-minute tour de force. I could think of no other face that I hated more than mine. Then it happened. The glass rippled like a pebble dropped into water, and the reflection blinked, though I hadn't. I leaned in, certain that it was just an illusion conjured by my sleep-deprived mind. I put the glass down, touched my face, and recoiled in horror when I realized that only one of us was smiling, and it was not the guy on my side of the mirror. Then the voice came, low, soothing, impossibly deep. It didn't echo in the room, it echoed within me. I can give you what you desire. Any sane person would have screamed or bolted off, but I wasn't sane, not then. Days without sleep and weeks of buried panic had dulled the sharp edge of fear. My thoughts moved like sludge. My mouth was bone dry, and my heartbeat roared in my ears like a war drum. I knew I should have been afraid, but instead, I just stared. Somewhere inside me, the last rational voice tried to rise, tried to scream that none of this was real, that this wasn't how the world worked. But it drowned beneath the weight of fatigue and desperation. I was vulnerable in ways I couldn't even understand. "What can you give me?" I asked. The words scraped out of my cracked lips in a hoarse croak, barely louder than breath. The thing smiled. My face stretched into something too wide, too sharp, like it had forgotten how human skin was meant to fit. "You want time," it said. "That's what you wish for, isn't it?" "Don't we all?" I murmured, my voice little more than dust riding air. It leaned forward, the smile deepening into something predatory, yet oddly kind, familiar. "I offer you a gift," it said, "the power to stop time, completely. The world, frozen at your will. Move through it untouched, Think, rest, work, while no one else moves, no one else knows. My breath hitched. Was I really so far gone that I was entertaining a deal with a hallucination? Maybe. But if this was just a dream, what harm could there be in playing along? Fantasies didn't leave scars. No one gets hurt when nothing is real. Nothing comes without a price. What would I owe you? The thing tilted its head. That alien predatory grin still stretched across our shared face, like a mask that didn't quite fit. Nothing that you can't refuse to give. Nothing beyond your control. And just like that, it was over. The reflection smoothed itself out, my face returning to its normal, exhausted shape. The echo in my skull faded into silence. The presence, the entity, was gone. I blinked. Silence pressed in. My hand trembled as I reached for the glass of water on the side of the sink. I downed it in one long gulp, hoping the coolness would snap me out of whatever trance I'd slipped into. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe the stress had finally cracked something in my head that seemed more reasonable than bargaining with a phantom in the mirror. I shuffled back to my desk, collapsed into the chair, and before I realized I had dropped my head onto my chemistry book. Sleep had claimed me. I woke the next morning with no more knowledge than I'd started with the evening before, and with so little sleep that I might as well have been a reanimated corpse dragging itself to the exam hall. My brain felt wrapped in fog, every thought slow and sluggish, like it had to wade through molasses before surfacing. At 8:59, I was sitting in front of an exam paper waiting to be flipped at the start signal. The room buzzed with quiet anticipation. Pens clicked, pages rustled, a throat cleared. I hadn't even flipped the paper over when a flicker of memory surfaced. My dream from the night before. Almost without thinking, and mostly as a joke to myself, I narrowed my thoughts and silently commanded the clock on the wall to stop. To my utter astonishment, it did. Everything did. The professor, mid-stride, froze in place as if sculpted in wax. A girl across the aisle was halted mid-sneeze, her face twisted comically, hands suspended inches from her nose. The steady hum of the LED lights fell into absolute silence. Even the motes of dust hanging in the sunlight next to the window paused, caught in midair like tiny stars trapped in glass. Time had obeyed me. I sat there for a long moment, heart hammering in the stillness, testing the edges of this impossible calm. Then, with the world locked in place around me, I calmly flipped the exam paper open and began to read. No ticking clock, no pressure, no anxious glances from classmates. Just me and the questions. I took my time, worked through each problem carefully, checked and rechecked every answer. Hours might have passed, days even. It didn't matter. When I finally let time resume, it was as if only a second had passed. That day, I aced the exam, and I never looked back. At first, I used the gift carefully, sparingly, to study, to think, to buy time during moments of pressure. It felt harmless, efficient, responsible even. After a while, it crept into even smaller parts of my everyday life. Overslept, stop time, and get ready without being late. Need to think of a good comeback during a tense conversation. Freeze everything and prepare for as long as you need. Want to get a promotion? Hit pause. Complete your tasks in half the time with double the results. Then unpause like nothing happened. Time became my personal playground. I used it to read more, learn more, do more. It felt like I was outsmarting the system, hacking life itself. But the human body is not an infallible, incorruptible machine. By the time I was 24, things started feeling off. There was gray in my hair. lines forming around my eyes and mouth. My joints ached after sitting for too long. I visited a doctor who told me I had the stress profile of someone in their late 30s. "Are you under extreme pressure?" she asked. I brushed it off. In this day and age, who isn't? If only in the back of my mind, I started to realize time wasn't freezing for me. It was only freezing for everyone else. Every time I willed a pause, every hour I spent alone in the frozen world, my body kept aging. My cells didn't stop dividing. My bones didn't stop thinning. My heart didn't stop beating. I was spending my life in the stillness, burning through it, actually. I told myself I'd use it less. I didn't. It had become some sort of reflex. Drop a glass, pause time, catch it. Need to pee during a movie? Pause time, go to the toilet, unpause. Forgot my keys, stop time, go back home, grab them. No stress, no consequences. I never dated seriously. It was too hard to connect. People lived in the moments. I lived between them. My friends joked about it, said I was an old soul, that it started showing on the outside, too. "I swear, you look older every time I see you." They laughed. I forced smiles. While they got married, had kids, built messy, vibrant lives full of imperfect moments, I lingered in quiet perfection, efficient, solitary, my own wonderfully controlled perfection. At 28, I looked 45. I moved like a tired man, a slow man, a man who had seen too much, too quickly. Soon, there were no more calls from friends, no more texts, no one left to invite me to dinner or to ask how I was doing. I'd drifted away from everyone, not out of anger or conflict, just immeasurable, immense distance. And then, no matter how often I would stop time to delay it, came my 30th birthday, a milestone for most. For me, a gravestone. I lit a single candle on a cupcake, bought from the 24-hour grocery store. I was in no mood for celebration. With all the overtime I had been accumulating, who knew how old I actually was by this point? Birthdays had lost all meaning, and only the annoying skeleton of formality had remained. My eyes, now foggy with cataract, stared at the small flickering flame, and then something moved. The shadows in the room that had been dancing with the flame started thickening. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting with every movement, each creak of bone a reminder of time's toll. I knew what this was. I know who this was. "You lied to me," I said, my voice rough, weathered by years of silence. "You said there would be no consequences." A ripple passed through the darkness. Then, like smoke drawing breath, the shadows coalesced into a familiar form, the version of myself I had once been. Young, sharp-eyed, unscarred. It wore my old smile, that arrogant, desperate curve of the mouth I used to believe made me brave. I said the price would be nothing out of your control. It replied, its demonic voice smooth and cruelly calm. "And you got exactly what you asked for." My hands trembled, wrinkled skin clenching into fists that had long since forgotten strength. I stared at the figure before me, my doppelganger, frozen in the prime of a life I had squandered in stolen moments. I was an old man now, brittle and forgotten, peering into the eyes of someone who had never paid the cost. The silence felt was suffocating, thick with everything I could no longer undo, the years I had leapt over, the memories I had never made, birthdays I missed, seasons that passed without witness, people who had moved on while I paused the world to chase a fantasy of control. Tears welled at the corners of my eyes, not just from anger, but from mourning. Mourning the man I might have been, the life I could have lived had I let it unfold, moment by moment, mistake by mistake. I thought I was saving time, I whispered. each word dry and crumbling, like dust dislodged from the top of a forgotten shelf. Instead, you were spending it. The creature's voice whispered through my mind, with the very same voice that had haunted me all those years ago, faster than anyone else, and gifting it to me, while others laughed, cried, failed, loved. You stepped aside into solitary perfection. You stole years of moments and filled them with nothing. You mistook silence for peace, stillness for life. My gaze fell back to the lone birthday candle before me. Its flame wavered once as if unsure, then guttered out, its final breath of light swallowed whole by the dark. And just like that, I was alone again. Not in frozen time, but in a world that had kept moving, kept growing, kept living without me. The silence I had once worshipped as sanctuary now rang hollow, a tomb I had built with my own hands, and in that stillness I felt them, the weight of all the seconds I had stolen, the missed laughter, the unshed tears, the embraces I never gave, 1,000 lifetimes unlived, pressing down on me like ash from a fire long dead. Time had never stopped, only I had. You survived, for now, but the shadows aren't done with you yet. If this story gave you chills, like the video, share it with someone who dares to watch and comment your thoughts, especially if you're watching in the dark. Subscribe to Spectral, Shadows, where fear never sleeps, and the next nightmare is always waiting. We'll be watching.